Part 2. The water had gone flat and grey. She stared down at it, her lips pressed tight together, then plunged her hands under the surface. "Oh!" she cried, and jumped back. She took her right hand by the wrist and held it up. Her thumb was bleeding. "Anne, don't move," he said. "Stay right there." He ran upstairs to the bathroom and rummaged in the medicine chest for alcohol, cotton, and a band-aid. When he came back down, she was leaning against the refrigerator with her eyes closed, still holding her hand. He took the hand and dabbed at her thumb with the cotton. The bleeding had stopped. He squeezed it to see how deep the wound was, and a single drop of blood welled up, trembling and bright, and fell to the floor. Over the thumb, she stared at him accusingly. "It's shallow," he said. "Tomorrow you won't even know it's there." He hoped that she appreciated how quickly he had come to her aid. He'd acted out of concern for her, with no thought of getting anything in return. But now the thought occurred to him that it would be a nice gesture on her part not to start up that conversation again, as he was tired of it. "I'll finish up here," he said. "You go and relax." "That's okay," she said. "I'll dry." He began to wash the silverware again, giving a lot of attention to the forks. "So," she said, "you wouldn't have married me if I'd been black." "For Christ's sake, Anne." "Well, that's what you said, didn't you?" "No, I did not. The whole question is ridiculous. If you had been black, we probably wouldn't even have met. You would have had your friends and I would have had mine. The only black girl I ever really knew was my partner in the debating club, and I was already going out with you by then. But if we had met and I'd been black, then you probably would have been going out with a black guy." He picked up the rinse-in nozzle and sprayed the silverware. The water was so hot that the metal darkened to pale blue, then turned silver again. "Let's say I wasn't," she said. "Let's say I am black and unattached and we meet and fall in love." He glanced over at her. She was watching him and her eyes were bright. "Look," he said, taking a reasonable tone. "This is stupid. If you were black, you wouldn't be you." As he said this, he realized it was absolutely true. There was no possible way of arguing with the fact that she would not be herself if she were black. So he said it again. "If you were black, you wouldn't be you." "I know," she said, "but let's just say." He took a deep breath. He had won the argument, but he still felt concerned. "Say what?" he asked. "That I'm black, but still me, and we fall in love. Will you marry me?" He thought about it. "Well?" she asked, and stepped close to him. Her eyes were even brighter. "Will you marry me?" "I'm thinking," he said. "You won't. I can tell. You're going to say no." "Since you put it that way, no more considering. Yes or no." "Jesus, Anne. All right, no." She said, "Thank you," and walked from the kitchen into the living room. A moment later, he heard her turning the pages of a magazine. He knew that she was too angry to be actually reading it, but she didn't snap through the pages the way he would have done. She turned them slowly, as if she were studying every word. She was demonstrating her indifference to him, and it had the effect he knew she wanted to have. It hurt him. He had no choice but to demonstrate his indifference to her. Quietly, thoroughly, he washed the rest of the dishes. Then he dried them and put them away. He wiped the counters and the stove and scoured the linoleum where the drop of blood had fallen. While he was at it, he decided, he might as well mop the floor. When he was done, the kitchen looked new, the way it looked when they were first shown the house, before they had ever lived here. He picked up the garbage pail and went outside. The night was clear and he could see a few stars to the west, where the lights of the town didn't blur them out. On El Camino, the traffic was steady and light, peaceful as a river. He felt ashamed that he had let his wife get him into a fight. In another 30 years or so, they would both be dead. What would all that stuff matter then? He thought of the years they had spent together, and how close they were, and how well they knew each other. and his throat tightened so that he could hardly breathe. His face and neck began to tingle. Warmth flooded his chest. He stood there for a while, enjoying these sensations, then picked up the pail and went out the back gate.